I saw the letter from the Maryland congressional delegation sent on June 9th, requesting a liaison and more transparency with claims. The Department of Labor wrote back to me in response to your letter and said 2 members of our team already serve as liaisons to our congressional delegation, and we have regular calls with lawmakers where we continuously address these issues they write about. Are you satisfied with that response?
No, we've been very frustrated and continue to be so. This is by far the #1 constituent issue that we get calls about. We have submitted over 1,000 claims. The Department of Labor, people were trying to help through the process. We've been successful at helping resolve maybe just over 100 of those, 10%. And we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. I mean, those are just the people that call us. We hear, of course, of thousands of others who are waiting in line. So it's really important that this get resolved in an urgent manner. The federal government has provided the state of Maryland with an additional $16 million to help process these claims. Unfortunately, despite that, with the last sort of comparative report we got, Maryland remains in the bottom 10 states in terms of processing these claims.
When I speak to state legislators, they all tell me that they've sort of hit a wall on this issue, that they don't receive that much communication from the Department of Labor, and they can continue to hold hearings, but they really can't do much to force the hand of the Department of Labor or the governor to fix the system. What can be done? As a U.S. Senator, do you have the power to make any reforms or changes or apply pressure?
Well, we've asked the governor's office to provide suggestions as to other measures that could be taken. And there was a letter that was sent by the Hogan administration to the U.S. Department of Labor, but it did not address any of these regulatory issues that some have complained about. It said that they could use more money, and we have provided the state of Maryland now with 2 rounds of funds to help implement this program. And I should say, the federal government is also footing the bill, as it should, for the additional $600 per week emergency unemployment benefit, and of course the cost for expanding eligibility. And that's an appropriate federal role. But again, if you look at how Maryland compares right now to other states, we're way behind, and that's not a function of the federal government. All those states are playing by the same rules.
How does that make you feel when you do hear from constituents who can't feed their families, who can't buy medications, don't know if they're going to have a place to live in a few months, all because they can't get these benefits that they are entitled to? You can forward their claims to the Department of Labor, but what do you say to them when their issue still doesn't get resolved?
Well, this has really raised my blood pressure a lot. We continue to work with every constituent that calls. We are in touch with the Department of Labor, trying to facilitate these claims. And we are sharing those constituents' frustration at the inability to get through, because people are stretched so thin. These are now people who have been waiting weeks and weeks and weeks, but their bills have not been waiting. Their bills keep piling up. And these are the funds that are, supposed to be there for them. I mean, the only silver lining here is that when they do finally get processed, they will be eligible for the full payments back to the time when they were originally eligible. But for somebody who, can't pay for their groceries right now, that's cold comfort at the moment. So we will continue to push. We asked for any, changes in federal regulations that they thought were necessary. And as I said in the letter that was written to the Secretary of Labor, they didn't identify any regulations. So we just continue to urge the Department of Labor to move as quickly as possible. And, this is one area where Maryland should not be, behind the great majority of states.
Have you, or are you aware of any other federal legislators who have had direct communication with the governor about this?
We've had direct communication with the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Labor, Secretary Robinson, and her team. This has come up, of course, in correspondence with the governor. And I believe Senator Cardin also spoke directly with the governor about this issue.
Do you support expanding the CARES Act? Come July 31st, those $600 benefits, weekly benefits are set to go away, and if so, how long would you support it for? And do you support the $600 a week still?
Well, I do believe we need to extend the emergency unemployment provisions, which expire on July 31st. It's important that we continue to have an expanded definition of who's eligible to include, part-time workers, gig workers, contract workers. And it's also important to have an increased amount of $600 or some additional amount to help people replace their lost income. In terms of how long it should last, we could adjust the length of time based on certain economic indicators. But as of right now, it looks like millions of Americans will continue to be unemployed through no fault of their own because of this pandemic. And so long as that's the case, it's important that we extend the emergency unemployment benefits.
And what can be done for Marylanders who lost their jobs and lost their health insurance with it? The state marketplace closed this week. If they can't afford food or rent, how can they afford insurance?
Well, this is a big problem. We're also working to try to get the Senate to take up a bill that already passed the House called the HEROES Act, which provides for COBRA payments to be reduced. These are individuals who lost their jobs and their employer was paying for a share of their health insurance. This would help cover some of those costs. We're also really encouraging people to use the WorkShare program. Maryland is one of about 25 states that has the WorkShare program. The way that is set up, if you're an employer and you want to put your employees on, let's say, 50% time and 50% wages because you still don't have your customers coming back fully in the door, you can pay them 50% of wages and they can then get unemployment through the unemployment insurance system and also qualify for that additional $600 a week. That helps the business and small businesses scale up as their customers come back in the door, and it allows the employees to have that income. And to the extent that they are covered by their employer's health insurance, they, of course, can help that as well. I should say there are also other provisions in the bill that allow employers to essentially write off the costs of their contributions to employees' health insurance as they keep them on. Even if they furlough them instead of laying them off, they still could provide health insurance and they would get this tax credit, federal tax credit to cover the costs.
And just one final question on unemployment. I've been following it for some time, and we'll go to the governor's press conference, and he did admit that it was a rocky start, but all the issues are fixed. We say there are still hundreds of thousands of people pending adjudication or waiting for a response, and he says most of those people don't qualify, but that the system's working. You've said that Maryland's in the bottom 10. So where's the disconnect here? And who can be held accountable for these people not receiving their benefits?
Well, all I know is we continue to get lots of calls every day into our office. This is still by far the number one issue that we get calls about. And, as I mentioned, we've been trying to process about 1,000 of those constituent calls through the system. About 100 have been resolved. So the reality is that we've got to fix this system because there are thousands and thousands of Marylanders who are hurting and hurting badly.